If you're enjoying the Health Geeks Book Club podcast, we'd appreciate if you hit the subscribe button, leave a like, rating, or review, whichever your preferred podcatcher platform allows.
This episode is sponsored by Well Balanced Nutrition and 360 Health. So, Eleanor, we're still on our break, but...
Oh, it's coming to an end soon, but you know what? We're primed for February.
That's right. We've got some really exciting books to share. But while you're waiting, we wanted to share one more replay that we really enjoyed from last year, and that's the Telomere Effect. You might be working on some behavior changes right now, as we tend to do in the new year, right, Eleanor?
And probably all year long.
Yes, that's right. But you might not realize how much they can affect us at a cellular level. And we talk all about that as we talk about the book, The Telomere Effect. So
yeah, and that's my role model, Elizabeth Blackburn. So
yes. You
got to read her book.
Well, we have a brand new Instagram account we are excited to share with you.
Oh my gosh, we're coming into the new age.
Woohoo! So you know that you can reach us on Facebook, but now we are on Instagram at Health Geeks Podcast. So check us out and follow us.
Oh, please do.
All right, well, let's listen to this replay.
Okay, roll it.
Welcome to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Hey, it's Kristen and...
This is Eleanor over here.
And have you heard of telomeres?
Yeah.
We are talking about those today, and the book, The Telomere Effect, A Revolutionary Approach to Living Younger, Healthier, Longer. And the authors are...
Elizabeth Blackburn, who is an incredible woman, and I had the privilege of being in her presence not too long ago, and she is incredible because she got a Nobel Prize for discovering this really interesting part of our chromosomes and how they function. The telomeres are at the end, and she and her graduate student discovered an enzyme called Telomeres in 1984. But Elizabeth also was elected to the Foreign Associate of the National Academy of Sciences in 1993. In 2006, she was awarded the Albert Lasker Medical Research Award. In 2007, she was named one of Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People, and so on and so on and so on. In 2009, she got the prize. So, amazing woman.
I agree. I have a new woman crush.
Yeah, that's kind of fun.
Yeah, she is. I loved her writing. I loved reading about her discoveries. And, yeah, she is well awarded.
Yeah, and I think she's from Australia, isn't she?
Yes.
And then the other author, Elissa Epel, you want to tell us about her?
Yeah, she's a professor and vice chair in the Department of Psychiatry at University of California. She is very interested in healthy aging and how we can reach vulnerable populations, which I think is a neat combination.
Oh, yeah.
She's involved in research looking at the psychological, social, and behavioral pathways underlying chronic psychological stress. And she also studies the interconnections between stress, addiction, eating, and metabolic health. So fascinating.
Yeah, I just love the way these people find each other on a similar idea. Sort of like you and me.
Uh-huh.
You know, we could be like juniors.
That's right.
But they partner up and bring their expertise together and provide to the rest of us a really interesting read.
Yeah. So the book lets us in on the science behind the mind-body connection and how we can not just live longer, but have healthier, longer lives. And that's what we all want, right? We don't want to be living a long time in a nursing home.
No, yeah. If we're going to be alive, we want to be alive, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So she takes us through the concept of the lifespan and how we can match it with our health span. And she goes into the book, well, let me pause. Let me retract that. Tell us what are telomeres and why should we care?
Okay. Your chromosomes, most of us have, well, maybe not. Each cell has in our bodies has a nucleus, and inside there's some genetic material called DNA. And DNA winds itself up into something that we can look at on microscopes called chromosomes. And every time they unwind so that the messages that they're carrying can be interpreted in the cell, they can get damaged rewinding. And so the ends can get shorter and shorter. So what people have begun to notice is the base pairs. DNA is made of nucleotides, and there are base pairs of chemicals that sequence themselves. And folks notice that at the end of our chromosomes, there's a repeating base pair sequence. And the longer that goes, the healthier the chromosome is. The healthier the chromosome is, the healthier your cell is going to be. Is that?
Yeah. So
we should care about that.
We should care, and because we know the longer telomeres, the more protective they are of our health. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I like the analogy that it's like the cap on the end of a shoelace.
Absolutely. That we all get a picture of.
Right.
It's the DNA is a long stringy thing, like a shoelace. And then that little plastic thing that lets you put it through the eyelet on your shoe protects the end. And that's what these telomeres are doing.
Exactly. So how this book starts out is a story of two women sitting at a coffee shop. They're the same age, similar stress levels, yet one is aging much faster inside and out. So you can tell through her skin, and she's getting more health issues. And they just pose the question, why is that? Why do some of us age so much faster than others?
And they also want to know, is your fate sealed? Is it anything that you can change or not?
Exactly.
Yeah. They're saying maybe.
Maybe. Well, then the next part is a dive into how Dr. Blackburn discovered telomeres. I loved learning about this part, and it's all from Liz's perspective, and you get to kind of see every step of the way what she was able to discover. And, with science, it takes a long time. It takes lots of different experiments to figure this one thing out. So just the way that she told her story was really exciting to me.
Yeah, that industry of an individual to stick with it and stay in there and stand on their feet for that long.
Yeah, and it all started with pond scum.
Yeah, right. Yeah, different organisms along the way. And is this translatable from one life species to another?
Right. So once she discovered telomeres and how do you say it? Telomeres?
Telomeres.
Telomeres.
Well, that's the way I say it. Now somebody else can call in and tell us differently.
So then she was looking at, okay, so this is protective. Now what affects our telomere length? And then this is where the majority of the book goes into.
Yeah, what causes them to shorten?
What causes them to shorten, and what kinds of people or activities have longer telomeres.
Yeah, and she also says maybe you can get them to grow back a little bit.
Yeah.
Is it reversible or not reversible?
Yeah, many of the things in this book they're promising, right? It's there are things that we can do, and let's go over those, shall we?
Yeah.
So the first thing that they started to study was stress and how stress affects telomere length. They looked at moms caring for children with special needs. Who could be more stressed out than that? And they discovered that, indeed, those stressed out moms had shorter telomeres than their mom peers who weren't dealing with special needs.
Yeah, anybody that's known a caregiver, and even if it's a caregiver of an elderly person, we know that they're at greater risk for health compromise.
Exactly. But the good news is that when participants of their studies viewed stress as a challenge that they could overcome versus this very heavy negative thing, it didn't affect their telomeres as much, correct? So we can then not have to avoid stress altogether, but it's how we look at stress and take that on.
You mean that mental focus where we mind our thoughts?
Exactly.
Like our cells could be listening to our thoughts?
Yes. Dr. Blackburn says that a lot, that our cells are listening to what we're thinking, and we have 65,000 thoughts in a day. And so to be aware of all of those thoughts, and if they're negative, how we can turn those around into a more positive light, that is actually very healthful for us to do.
Yeah, and she's not the only person that's telling us that story. She's just telling us, I can show you at a molecular level, it does make a difference, which is what's so cool about this book. Other people just say, look at the behaviors are changing. If I have positive thoughts, my day goes back. This is down to, nucleotide base pairs.
Which I think is so neat. It proves that mind-body connection is a real thing.
Well, it does give us strong evidence there, yes.
Yes. So she does go into mindfulness and meditation and how powerful that is.
Yeah, and I think her partner in this book, Elissa Epel, is a good influence on this. This cognitive-based therapies that we're talking about, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, is probably in the realm of the other author, not Liz, because Liz is in the lab.
That's right. So self-compassion is also brought up here. Kristen Neff has done a ton of research in the self-compassion industry, I guess, and how helpful that is against negative thoughts. So she does talk about self-compassion and how we can use that. And she also talks about optimism and conscientiousness as personality traits that tend to have longer telomeres.
And one of the things that I think about the way they structured this book is at the beginning of these parts, they give you a little inventory that you can go through yourself. And sometimes it's a similar inventory that they've used in their research. So when you answer this, they can give you, based on your responses, where you fall in this. Like if it's the stress assessment, they ask you questions and they'll say, well, you have high stress. Here's some things you might do. And so at the end of the chapters, they give you a renewal lab. And they actually, it's not a prescription, but they say, here's some things that could help if this is your issue.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And we were saying that, if you don't really want to read into all the science part, that you would just get a lot out of that assessment and then the renewal lab part. And that could even be like a workbook in itself.
I think so too. I think you could tear out these labs and you'd have a good set of instructions to reflect on.
Yeah.
And ideas about what to do about the situation you're in. When you talked about caregiver stress, there's other kinds of stress in the mental area. Depression is one, anxiety. These are things that really complicate people's worlds, but it's also having an effect down there at the cellular level.
Exactly. Well, speaking of stress and depression and anxiety, we know from our other books how exercise
Oh, yes, we do.
can be a powerful tool to help against that.
Yeah.
So they also have a chapter about exercise, and she goes into cardio and how that's the most beneficial type of exercise for our cellular health. She mentions that exercise charges up the cell cleanup crew so that cells have less junk buildup, more efficient mitochondria, and fewer free radicals. And in Spark, we learned how impactful exercise was on mental health, which now we've learned to tie that back to longevity via telomeres. And we learned about the cell cleanup, which another word for that is autophagy, that we learned about in the Switch, which that book really only emphasized how fasting triggers that cellular cleanup crew, but she's mentioning how exercise can do the same thing. So kind of coming full circle here on this exercise topic.
And by paying attention to this and learning that there are behaviors we can do that cause down there at that micro level these little garbage men to go around and fix things. You take the trash out and the repairmen to come in. What benefits? There's really very little excuse now for nobody to be moving their body.
Yeah, and I think
we know it's good for us, right?
And from our reading and conversation, that has truly been impactful for me in the way that I think about exercise, because it has been just this thing you do to keep a healthy weight, right?
Well, prior, yes,
yeah.
maybe.
and even though I knew there were these other things, like diving deeper into the science behind them and how impactful they are. Has made me want to go move my body more than ever, because I know that it's helpful down to my cells.
Well, yeah, and he's saying it helps control your brain a little bit so that your brain can think to do the mindfulness.
Yeah.
If you're not exercising, it's a dominoes effect maybe.
Absolutely.
But too much exercise can be a no-no. It can be damaging. So there's sweet spots in all of these conversations that we're finding as we talk about the different topic areas of our book reading.
Yeah, they do go into overtraining. And if you are exercising without resting, allowing your body to repair what has happened when you exercised, then you're setting yourself up for the opposite of what you want.
Yeah.
Right.
And the benefits to your immune system, if you are stressing beyond it, you hurt your immune system. If you're in the area where you get the benefits that your immune system benefits from, then those cellular defense mechanisms and the chemicals they secrete can help protect their cells. The immune response is critical in all of this.
Yes, absolutely. So those rest and recovery days are really important.
Yeah.
Sleep. She goes into sleep. And again, this comes full circle with the books that we've read, because she quotes Matt Walker, which is the author of Why We Sleep, one of our past books.
Yep.
And
check out the podcast.
That's right. She talks about the same concepts he did in that book and ties good sleep habits to longer telomeres. So not much to say on that, but I thought it was super cool that Matt Walker was in this book, and that tied around full circle as well.
We must be hitting the right authors.
And if you're interested in choosing healthier foods and cooking those at home, actually, Well Balanced Nutrition has a meal planning that works course and challenge coming up, where you get the community piece. We all get to work on cooking at home together. You get to learn how to plan in a practical way. You get lots of recipes. Come on over to wellbalancednutrition.com to check that out.
And I'm Eleanor over at 360 Health for You, and we're making healthy happen, looking at creating healthy lifestyles in our families and our communities. We like to build healthy bodies so that you age with health and wealth and great attitude. We have all sorts of fun things to do and lots of educational opportunities to help you find your way through this craziness. So check me out at 360healthforyou.com.
Oh, okay. So next she talks about dieting and weight. I really appreciated this part. And I think that, is it Elissa? Elissa
yes,
probably had a good role in this, because she is involved in metabolism and psychiatry. So interesting enough, she says weight loss only marginally affects telomeres. And she points out that depression is a much bigger issue when it comes to telomere length. And for me, I've seen dieting and obsession over weight loss lead to stress and depression. So I thought it was really important that she pointed that out, that
absolutely.
If weight is an issue and it's causing stress and depression, then maybe weight loss isn't the right focus there, because it's not even having that big of an impact on your telomere length, which is your health span, right?
Right. And that obsession with appearance is definitely has psychological edges.
Yes. And it leads to weight cycling or yo-yo dieting. And that is proven, they have found to shorten telomeres.
Not good.
Not good. So it's that all or nothing yo-yo dieting. I'm on Monday, I'm off on the weekend.
Or 3 months, and then you just revert back to the other, and then you get into the set point conversation about, then it's harder to lose the weight anyway. You're really messing with the mechanical pieces and chemical pieces of metabolism.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like a story I heard about, someone going and losing a bunch of weight on the Atkins diet, but then went back to normal and gained all of that or back.
Right.
That's a good example of
and that happens
dieting.
over and over and over. Yeah. Well, what about the diabetes story? Because, a lot of these books are giving us some statistics, which I think we do need to be paying attention to. Diabetes is rampant in the U.S. We're the top of the list, I think. But other countries are getting there, too, because our foods and things are moving to other countries.
Right. So she does talk about how insulin resistance is something we want to pay a whole lot of attention to. And so that's kind of in the pre-diabetes range when our insulin levels start to not be able to get the glucose into the cells efficiently.
Right.
And they encourage anti-inflammatory foods, a Mediterranean-style diet, which is heavy on, again, the low glycemic index foods, lots of plants, lots of fiber. She talks a little bit about olive oil and how that's an anti-inflammatory food, fatty fish as an anti-inflammatory food. So this is very much in line with the well-balanced philosophy. So I enjoyed that chapter. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I didn't have any argument with the points she made. I thought it was well substantiated. And again, this is an epidemic, actually, of the weight issue and the diabetes and the relationship of those two because of how fat cells work. We talked about that in another book we just reviewed. That has to do with hormones.
So what I found perhaps the most interesting was in the back of the book where they get into the social and physical environments that affect telomere. And I think when we first talked about this, you said that it was slightly depressing to review this. And I agree, because everything else was very positive, the things that we have control over and can change and can increase our health span. And then we end with this, which is kind of hard to change.
Yeah, and what I was saying is that's in a segment of our population. Our conversation that we've had so far is relevant to a segment of our population.
Tell me more.
Well, I think when you get into the more depressed communities where the accesses to food and the policies that structure our society make it complicated. And one of the things would be the work schedules. People that work multiple shifts, night shifts, those sorts. Their whole relationship with the moving world is different. We can talk about disparities. That's what we're talking about. Places and faces that support our telomeres. They talk. The section is called Outside In. The social world shapes our telomeres.
Right, and it basically, like you were saying, points out that the vulnerable populations are hit hard with the things that shorten our telomeres.
Yeah, stress.
Stress, and I think of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're stuck in that lower, the bottom side of that, trying to get their financial needs met, their physical needs met, and they've got a lot of stress. So what we learned in that chapter is that having a safe community and a green environment like trees, bushes, nature, and plants equates to longer telomeres. Which I thought that was neat because, don't we always feel good when we're like in a pretty neighborhood with lots of trees and flowers?
But reconnecting to our natural world too.
Yeah.
And we get isolated with all this concrete and buildings and multifamily dwellings, car fumes, car noise, lights on all the time because of safety issues. All sorts of things disrupt the biological health of our cells.
Right. And this is yet another example that's exciting to me that, like, we know about this common sense wise, but now we have this tie at the cellular level, what it's doing to us. And then obviously having a safe community is important because if you get stressed walking home from school or wherever you're walking, that's a constant stress that you have to deal with, and that's going to wear on your body. The type of job you have can even affect your telomeres. So white-collar jobs had longer telomeres. And that, again, makes sense, right? Less stress.
That's what I'm saying. Shift work is a little different than desk work.
Yeah.
Salary structure is different, too.
Yeah.
How do you make the ends meet? How do you cover the bills? How do you have insurance or not? And, just all the things that many of us take for granted affect a better health status than not. So how do we work on that? How do we face that as a community?
Those are the questions that came up for me, too.
Yeah, and there are answers out there. And I look at that as opportunity. It's when you don't know there's a problem, you don't do anything about it. But once you know there's a situation, there's more possibility that it will be addressed instead of ignored.
Yeah, good point. Well, and the last thing I want to point out is she calls out racism. Mm-hmm. That African American men have a great amount of social stress because of racism. Mm-hmm. And they did one study that showed men who had been discriminated against and internalized that had shorter telomeres. So I think it's good that she pointed that out. And, obviously we're in a movement to try to help with that issue.
Yeah, acknowledge it.
Yeah,
acknowledge this is real. This is not something people just make up, and it affects all of us. Mm-hmm. Because as a community, we want to be healthy. We don't want to have people or individuals who aren't healthy, because that is not the dream we have.
That's right. This whole concept reminds me of the Blue Zones. Another book. Mm-hmm. I'm blanking on the author's name. First name is too. Dan, but where he looks at the different areas in the world where people are living longest mm-hmm. and healthy lives. Mm-hmm. And what stood out to me in that book was how big community was. And I liked that I saw it here too. And I'd love to see how we can work on making sure everybody has a safe community and a healthy community to grow up in.
Yeah, and the blue zones, and also this book doesn't specifically address this, but the idea of more is not necessarily better. And they did mention rich people have some stress as well, that the two ends of the spectrum mm-hmm. can have shorter telomeres as well. So that I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. But the idea that, did you say something?
Dan Butner was the author.
Thank you. Yeah. So
I'm playing the producer role here.
Thank you. In the blue zones, those communities were not necessarily the richest communities in the world, as far as money goes, but they were the richest in the ability of people to have a quality of life. Where they did sleep, where they did eat good foods, where they did have good social interactions, they did laugh, they did drink coffee. Things that other people don't have time to do. These communities that live longer have got some good stuff going on, and it's not acquiring stuff. Clutter and possessions doesn't seem to be characteristic of those. Weren't there 9 communities in that book? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So here we've had this great pause, and maybe as we come out of our homes, and a lot of us have been reading these books, we'll have some new ideas about how to make a better world.
Yeah. And a good community for everybody, good healthy food, mm-hmm. time to sleep and relax, and move our bodies.
Yeah, and laugh. Don't forget to laugh.
And laugh, yes. Be positive. Get rid of those negative thoughts.
Well, do you recommend this book to anybody?
I do. I found it really interesting, very practical, all-around good read. I highly recommend it.
I absolutely do. I think this is one of my favorite books we've read so far, because it is new information to a lot of people, and it's got some solid underpinnings, and it's reinforcing a lot of the other readings that we've been doing. So I think this is definitely worth a star from me.
Yeah. If you're going to read any of the books, this is a good kind of summary of all the things.
And it has the working pieces too. It's got if you don't want to read the details,
the practical pieces.
Yeah, right. It's got the practical pieces
of what you can do to make a difference.
So read it with your friends. I'm Eleanor Russell with 360 Health, and you can find me at 360health4u.com.
And I'm Kristen Norton of Well Balanced Nutrition. Find us at wellbalancednutrition.com.
And keep reading.
And opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.